Hi, I'm Paul McLean. This is part 3 of the Strategies for Technical Theater, Face-to-Face, Digital, or Anywhere. And the focus of this particular webinar is going to be on costume design. So costume design, as it's set up in the sample resources in the TRL and on the Godot Fine Arts webpage, is set up into Unit 3, 5 separate lessons. And this one has 2 major projects that go along with it. So the first section is very much like the same setup for all of the other areas of design. We go over some basic design or costume design information in the PowerPoint, or you can create a small video with it. And an example of that video is as follows. Costume design. Costumes tell us social status and position, gender, occupation, personal style, such as flamboyancy or modest, independence versus regimentation, and occasion. In this next section, we'll look at a series of costumes on a variety of different models. What can you tell from the costumes? Remember to consider social status and position, gender, occupation, personal style, independence versus regimentation, occasion. Remember, it's important to document why you know this information based on the costume or makeup specifically. Who are these people based on the costumes? What can you determine about the occasion for each based on the costume? What are the similarities and differences in the costume? What do you know from the costumes alone? Costume designer's responsibilities: building or pulling costumes, establishing tone and style, indicating period and locale, indicating a character's nature, showing character relationships, allowing for movement, and coordinating with other design elements. Elements of costume design: line, shape, silhouette, color, fabric, and accessories. Silhouette and line. Often costumes distort the body, such as whip hoop skirts, corsets, zoot suits. These articles of clothing do not present the actual form of the body. This changing of shape and form has an effect on the visual understanding of the character. Forced silhouettes. More silhouettes. How do these silhouettes change the way you feel about the characters? Color and fabric. Color obviously affects how audiences see characters. Certain colors are associated with certain emotions. Fabrics have a great effect because of the texture, the social understanding of the prices associated with certain types of fabric. Burlap and silk have different connotations. Accessories. The quality of the accessories determine the social standing of the actor, such as a gold snuff box indicating a higher social standing than one made out of cheap wood. Actors must know what to do with these accessories. The costume shop. The costume shop is a little more hierarchical than the scene shop, since production of costumes is a little more standard than set building. It is comprised primarily of shop supervisor, first hand, cutter draper, and stitchers. Who's in the costume department? The costume designer. This person finds, makes, and/or coordinates the costumes for the cast. The master stitcher, a person who does the actual construction of the garment to be worn on stage. This person is also known as a tailor. The costume crew. These are the people that help the costume designer and master stitcher to complete any tasks they need assistance with. Sometimes the costumer and stitcher are the same person, and other times those roles are split up. Occasionally there are even different people filling those roles for each costume. The costume shop continued. The costume designer works with the shop supervisor, much in the same way the scenic designer does with the technical director. The first hand is in charge of patterning. The cutter draper cuts out the pattern and alters the pattern through a process called draping. A mock-up of the costumes is built out of muslin, a really cheap fabric. Stitchers. These are the laboring people in the shop who sew the costumes together. Follow-up questions for discussion. What is the importance of a costume in a production for the audience? How does a costume help an actor perform? Are costumes that are on stage for a small moment less important? Do they take less work? Related responsibilities of costume design: hairstyles, makeup, and masks. Makeup. From 1980 on, in some houses, some designers have been moving away from heavy makeup, with the exception of special effects. Corrective makeup uses shadows and highlights to bring out the skull under harsh lighting. Non-realistic makeup often attempts to hide the natural aspects of the human bone structure. Masks. A mask is a face on a face, and they are usually rigid and do not change. While it is absolutely possible to move into reading a play for costume design and then designing a section from that play, the suggestions in the TRL move in a slightly different direction just to expand the opportunities and the types of explorations. So the lesson plan 2 in this unit is actually trash bag costume design. It's often called Project Trashaway. There's a worksheet provided for you. One of the biggest fears in designing costumes is not knowing how to draw. One of the reasons this particular lesson plan is included is that it can be done anywhere by anyone with literal trash or trash bags. So the structure of the exercise is as follows. You can do this in 2 different ways. You can have a pile of trash on the ground as students enter and ask the students to sit around the trash and tell students that their goal is to costume their teacher in 5 minutes. Or they could simply watch a small clip that the teacher has approved of a show like Project Runway. So session 2, or during this the next step, you're going to explain that they have to design a costume with a partner out of all recycled materials. Generally speaking, giving about 3 days to do this is advised. It's suggested that you talk about the project for a few weeks beforehand so you can have them start collecting recyclables and bringing them into class or bringing them into wherever they are. These could be water bottle costumes, cardboard box shapes, scrap fabric costumes. So you want to introduce the concept of starting to gather these materials possibly prior to the beginning of the actual costuming unit, and that way they will have the stuff there and ready to go once the design assignments have been given out. And then you want to pass out the character worksheets to the students. They'll need to create and sketch a costume rendering and fill out their worksheet before they start building the costumes. One of the ways to get around some of the fears of my drawing isn't that good on the human form is if you provide the students with a silhouette, they can literally place a sheet of paper over the silhouette, trace that, and then they can draw the costume on top of it. If they are working at home, they can put this design on another person, or they can put it on themselves, but it is important that the costume is wearable. That's part of the whole appeal. Once these designs are presented, it's suggested that you have a peer critique. The process for self-assessment at the end of this would be what are some of the difficulties you had with the project, what skills did you need to have as a costume designer yourself, and then how does the limited resources aspect of this design process affect the costume design. And then what did you enjoy mostly about this process? Again, in Lesson Plans 3 and 4, these are the Georgia Thespian Tech Challenge Handbook challenges associated with costume. Costume Quick Change Challenge, which is a lot of fun to be done in class. This is more effective as a face-to-face, although you could set up the same structure where you have one costume that a person is in and another costume that is to be put on, and then you time actually switching them out of the first costume into the second and hanging that costume ready to go. And then those times become a competitive element in the classroom, which can be fun depending on whether or not that suits you. Obviously, competition in the classroom can be great, but sometimes competition in the classroom doesn't work as well with certain classroom dynamics. So you do need to assess, is this good for you? Would this be detrimental? So if it's good for you to have that competitive element, you can keep that with the timing. Otherwise, they're just competing with themselves for the time. There is also a Georgia Thespian Sew a Button Challenge. This is also a costume-related technical challenge, and it's also a really good skill for the students to have and makes it a little more hands-on. Now, the Sew a Button Challenge absolutely can be done at home because you don't need another person. You just have to find a button, thread, and then something to sew it into. So that challenge could be done at home as well as in the classroom. Again, there's a timed element to it. You can use that time simply to self-assess, or you can add that competitive element, which is sometimes engaging. And then the very last lesson plan for costume design here in this introduction to costuming is the costume research project. There are a series of research options. Now, you can make these available to the students so that they can choose and select, but I really rather enjoy taking all of these options and cutting them up and putting them in a hat. So if you take a look at what's available in the lesson plan, we have... So the project is essentially this. Students create a total of 4 costume designs. 2 designs from 2 separate characters. So each finished design portfolio will include research pictures with notes, early developmental sketches, and a full color rendering with swatches. Each design should help establish location and period, social status and position, gender, occupation, personal style, independence and regimentation, and occasion. And you should use the elements of costume design to achieve it. This project takes a while. The students will have to first research who lived in these periods of time. It's a good idea to get primary and secondary research when they're actually going through and figuring out how they're going to research. And it's important that the students aren't necessarily recreating a specific person from the time period. You may need to find a specific person from the time period so that you can get paintings, drawings, comments on clothing, photography, if it's appropriate within the time frame of what folks were wearing. But you're actually going to create a character that did not exist, and you're going to draw from all of those particular research pictures. So a suggestion for the research here is 20 to 30 images of clothing, and then 5 to 10 images of accessories from the era as well. So that would include gloves, hats, jewelry, or armor. And then you've got a couple of options for presentations. You can create a huge poster board and write a 1 to 2 page paper, or you can create a detailed slideshow on the key costumes, the garments, the fashions of the era, or you can create an original video as a guide or documentary discussing and showcasing the images. So again, this project takes a great deal of time, but it absolutely can be done digitally, or it can be done in the classroom. And that's it for costume design, for what we have available in the resources. As always, if you have any comments, please email us directly, or if you would like to join the theater community, that's a great way to not just talk to us, but to other teachers from across the state, and the theater PLCs are also there for you to use. For additional questions, please contact the Fine Arts team. Jessica Booth, Paul McLean, Casey Hall.